Chapter 1. A name born in the shadow of a legend. History remembers very few men who were born beneath the shadow of greatness and somehow managed to create a legend of their own. Bjorn Ironside was one of those rare men. Long before kings feared his name, the world already feared his fathers. Ragnar Lothbrok, the Viking whose story spread from Scandinavia to the monasteries of England and the courts of Europe. For most sons, having a father like Ragnar would have been a blessing. For Bjorn, it was a burden, because no matter what he achieved, people would always ask the same question. Was he truly greater than Ragnar? Chapter 2. The son of a legend. According to the Icelandic sagas, Bjorn was the eldest son of Ragnar Lothbrok and the famous shield maiden Lagertha. Whether every detail is historically accurate, no one can say with certainty. But one thing is beyond debate. By the middle of the 9th century, a Viking leader named Bjorn had become known across Europe. Unlike many young warriors, Bjorn didn't inherit his father's reputation overnight. He earned it. Every voyage, every battle, every decision pushed him further away from being known simply as Ragnar's son. Chapter 3. Growing up among warriors. Imagine being a young Viking, watching your father return from distant lands, his ships filled with silver, his warriors singing songs of victory. Imagine hearing stories about England, about unknown kingdoms, about treasures beyond the sea. For Bjorn, adventure wasn't a dream, it was normal life. He learned early that the sea could make ordinary men immortal, axes could win battles, but courage could build legends. The sagas describe Bjorn as calm, patient, and far less reckless than many other Viking leaders. He didn't rush into danger, he studied it, then struck. Chapter 4. The man called Ironside. How did Bjorn earn the name Ironside? The truth, no one knows. Some legends claim no weapon could seriously wound him in battle. Others believe his armor was so strong, enemies believed he was protected by the gods themselves. Modern historians see it differently. Ironside was probably a title, a symbol of incredible toughness, rather than proof of supernatural power. Whatever the origin, the name stayed with him forever, and perhaps no Viking nickname became more famous. For Chapter 5. The world wasn't enough. Most Viking leaders were satisfied. Raiding England, Bjorn wasn't. He wanted to go farther than his father ever had, far beyond Britain, far beyond Francia, toward lands few Scandinavians had ever seen, the Mediterranean. To Vikings, it sounded almost mythical. Warm seas, rich cities, powerful kingdoms, and unimaginable wealth. But reaching it meant sailing thousands of kilometers through unfamiliar waters, past hostile kingdoms, with no guarantee of ever returning home. It was exactly the kind of impossible journey that created legends. Chapter 6. The greatest Viking expedition. Around the year 859, according to historical sources, Bjorn joined forces with another famous Viking leader, Halfdan. Together, they assembled one of the most ambitious Viking fleets ever launched. Dozens of longships left Scandinavia, their destination, the Mediterranean Sea. No Viking expedition had attempted anything quite like it before. The journey itself became an adventure. They sailed through the English Channel, past the coast of Francia, into the Atlantic, around the Iberian Peninsula, facing storms, enemy fleets, and dangerous waters. Many ships never made it, but Bjorn kept going. For him, the destination mattered less than proving it could be done. Chapter 7. The Mediterranean. Eventually, the dragon ships entered waters unlike anything the Vikings had ever known. The climate was warmer, The cities larger, the defenses stronger. Bjorn raided settlements along the coasts of modern-day Spain, Portugal, southern France, and Italy. Every successful raid sent shockwaves across Europe. The Northmen had arrived where almost no one expected them. Kings realized something terrifying. There was no coastline beyond Viking reach. The sea had become their highway. Chapter 8. The city that couldn't be conquered then. Bjorn heard stories about one city, the richest city in the Christian world, Rome, or so he believed. The Vikings had never seen anything like it. Massive walls, countless churches, endless wealth. Capturing such a city would make Bjorn greater than Ragnar himself. But first, he needed a plan, because storming those walls by force was impossible. And that is exactly when Bjorn came up with one of the most brilliant and controversial plans in Viking history. Chapter 9. The Greatest Deception. Standing before the walls of the city, Bjorn realized something. No Viking army, no matter how fearless, could break through those defenses. The gates were too strong, the walls too high. A direct assault would end in disaster. So instead of using his axe, Bjorn decided to use his mind. According to later medieval accounts, he sent messengers to the city. Their message shocked everyone. Bjorn, the feared Viking leader, had died from illness during the voyage. His final wish was to be buried on holy Christian ground. The city's rulers hesitated. A dead Viking could no longer threaten them. Eventually, they agreed. The gates opened. A funeral procession entered the city. Warriors carried a wooden coffin, with Bjorn lying motionless inside. The priests began preparing the burial. Then, everything changed. The coffin burst open. Bjorn leaped to his feet, sword already drawn. Within moments, the Viking warriors attacked from inside. The city descended into chaos. It remains one of the most famous Viking stories ever told. But once again, history asks us to be careful. Many historians believe this dramatic tale became legendary over time. Some even argue the city wasn't Rome at all, but Luni, a wealthy Italian town mistaken for Rome by the Vikings. Whether every detail is true or not, the story perfectly captures how medieval Europe viewed the Vikings, not only as fierce warriors, but as masters of surprise. Chapter 10. The Long Voyage Home. After years at sea, Bjorn's fleet finally turned north. The ships carried treasure from distant kingdoms, but they also carried scars. Storms had destroyed vessels. Battles had claimed lives. Many who left Scandinavia would never see home again. History tells us that only a fraction of the original fleet returned, yet, despite the losses, the expedition became legendary. No Viking before Bjorn had sailed so far into the Mediterranean. He proved something extraordinary. The Viking world was far larger than anyone had imagined. Chapter 11. A king in his own right back in Scandinavia. Bjorn was no longer introduced as the son of Ragnar. He had earned his own place in history. According to Norse tradition, Bjorn eventually ruled parts of what is now Sweden. Some historians connect him with the Munso dynasty, though the evidence is limited. Like many Viking rulers, his life exists somewhere between history and legend. But one thing is certain: his name spread across Europe, not because of who his father was, but because of what he achieved himself. Chapter 12. The Shadow of Ragnar. There is something fascinating about Bjorn's story. Most sons spend their lives trying to escape their father's shadow. Bjorn didn't run from Ragnar's legacy. He built upon it. Ragnar opened the western seas. Bjorn pushed Viking exploration even farther. Together, their stories transformed the Viking Age. One inspired the dream. The other proved there were no limits. Perhaps that is why history remembers them side by side, not as rivals, but as two generations of the same unstoppable ambition. Chapter 13. History versus legend, like Ragnar. Much of Bjorn's story comes from the Icelandic sagas. Some events are supported by historical records. Others survive only through legend. Did he really fool an entire city by pretending to be dead? We don't know. Did he lead one of the greatest Viking expeditions ever recorded? Yes. Did his voyages change how Europe viewed the Vikings? Without question. Separating fact from legend isn't always possible, but sometimes the legends themselves reveal how extraordinary these people appeared to the world around them. Chapter 14. A legacy that crossed seas. When people hear the name Bjorn Ironside, many think only of Ragnar's eldest son. History remembers something greater, an explorer who crossed seas few dared to enter, a commander who carried Viking ships into the Mediterranean, a leader who transformed fear into reputation, and a man who proved that greatness can be inherited, but legend must always be earned. More than 11 centuries have passed. The Viking longships no longer sail across Europe. The kingdoms Bjorn raided have changed forever, yet his story continues to survive. Not because every detail can be proven, but because every generation chooses to tell it again. Perhaps that is the true meaning of immortality, not living forever, but being remembered, long after the world you knew has disappeared. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Beyond Empires, because beyond every empire lies another legend waiting to be discovered.